Hey everybody, it's Mr. Southern coming at you with another part of Unit 4, Lesson 2. I want to go through a little bit more because this does get pretty in-depth with static variables and methods. So let's go. I'm going to walk you through one of these in Module 7, just because it's already done, and then do another one in fresh in Module 8. So they get a little bit more complicated as you go along, in case you haven't noticed yet. So let's go through what's happening here. So on the first part, if I can go through this, what we're doing here, I'm just trying to read. So in this case, we have a project manager. They've been given a budget to develop an app, hire 8 software engineers. And the main thing is you need to know how much each software engineer will be paid for the project. So in order to do that in programming, we have to write a static method that returns the amount each software engineer will be paid for the project. Okay, so the first thing it wants me to do is to go to projectmanager.java, and it wants me to write a static method to return the amount each software engineer will be paid. So it says write a static method called calc engineers pay. So that's right here, right? Public static double with parameters, total budget, and num engineers that returns the total budget divided by the number of engineers. So this can seem kind of complicated, but remember for static variables, right? And I'll kind of write this in here as I'm talking. For static, methods, right? We need to do public static, right? And then for that, what comes next, that's going to be the data type, right? And then comes the method name, right? And then the parameters. So in this case, we have public static double. So we want pay because it could be dollars and cents. And we're going to take in the total budget and then the number of engineers. So that's what we're going to have in the tester class for project runner.java eventually, right? But before we get there, we need to basically remember parameters are there to prep and get ready to receive. So we're ready to receive a budget amount, and then we're ready to receive the number of engineers as an integer. So both of those is prepared to have. So in the tester class, if I put in, total budget of $1 million, right? Then that's going to go ahead and assign total budget as $1 million. And then if in the second number I hire 8 engineers, then it's going to assign 8 to the value for number of engineers. And then it's going to be able to return the total budget divided by number of engineers. Okay, so nothing too fancy here, but the main thing people are getting hung up on is that for static methods, we don't necessarily want to alter them later. We want them to kind of be fixed. Then we're going to do public static, okay? So that's that. And then when we go back to projectrunner.java, you're going to go ahead and do, we need to call the method first, right? So in this case, we created a object called salary per engineer, variable. It's going to be a double type. It has to match what's going to come out from calc engineers pay, right? Which is a double. Okay, so salary per engineer is a decimal. Okay, so that's the double. And then we need to call the class of project manager and then run the method called calc engineers pay. And then my inputs here are just going to be 15,500, which is the budget given here in the to do. And the second value is going to be 8, which is the number of software engineers that are going to work on the project. So again, let me make sure this is clear, right? So basically our format is going to be, we're going to use data type, right? And it's going to be whatever the variable name is that you want to do. And we can go ahead and roll right into calling the class and then dot the method and then parameter 1, parameter 2, right? So that's kind of the idea here. So it might be, what's probably hard about this lesson in particular is with the math class as well, so this whole unit, is we've gone away from just using an object to call a method. Now we're actually using classes to call an object. So I'm calling the calc engineers method, where I'm calling the calc engineers pay method from the project manager class. This is telling me where to look. Okay, and then finally we're going to print out that salary per engineer and then plus salary per engineer, because we have salary per engineer here and we need to return it here. Okay. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and assuming that's good. Yep, and there's my salary per engineer. Let me just test it, make sure this is good. I'm pretty sure it was good. Yep, we passed our tests. So that's great. Go ahead and finish, and let me go to module 8 to show you another example coming up. Okie doke. Let's go to 8. And then just startups on Shark Tank. Let's see, what do we want to do? Startup, Kickstarter, Rubrics Cube, concert. I'll just do startups on Shark Tank. Why not? I used to watch the show called Shark Tank. I don't even know if it's still on, but basically business owners pitch their ideas. They get their product out there and then, come up with it's a fascinating business model, but it's, like maybe I offer Mark Cuban, the owner of the Mavs, 20% equity in my company if he helps fund my ventures, right? Anyway, so what's happening here is we're going to look at the startup businesses that have appeared and has instance variables for the name of the company, description of the product, and whether or not the company got the deal. Okay, so the idea is, let's say I had, Southard's Vacuum Company and, whether or not they got the deal or not, right? Okay, so first things first, we need to go to startup.java. Okay. And I'm gonna real quick before I just dive into to-dos, please look at the code. Okay. We have public class startup, obviously. That's the startup class. We have not one, not two, but three different variables. So we got a name, we got a description, and we have a got deal, right? Which is a Boolean. So we haven't used those in a while, but it's a true false return. Okay. So those are already there. So that's nice. Like I don't have to keep, making up these variables, right? They're already done. So I probably need to use those first. Okay, so I want to declare initialize a static variable called num startups to 0. So they're telling me to use that variable. So what I'm going to do is we're going to keep this. So remember, everything here is contained in this class. So it's a private. Okay, so we don't want this carrying over through any other classes that I make up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and match that again. So I'm going to say, okay, let's do private. And then this is a static variable, right? So this needs to be static. And then it's going to be the number of startups. And you'll notice that they put 0 there. Okay, so it's going to be an int. And I'm just going to use the variable they call start num startups. And we're going to set it equal to 0. All right, so that's done. And then I'm going to delete some of these lines. Let's go ahead and run it now just to make sure do I have any errors right now? And I don't, right? It runs, nothing produces, but program's complete. So we're good there. So that's good. Especially as we get into more complicated things, please try and run the program and just make sure you're error free instead of waiting till the very end and finding 17 errors. Okay, now what it wants me to do. So to do number 1, part 1 is done. To do number 1, part 2, it says in the startup constructor, increment num startups by 1. Okay, so it wants me to, there it is, increment num startups by 1. So let me just make sure I didn't like glance over anything. So it says stats name to the specified name, description to the specified description. Okay, so that's all done with this keyword for each of these parameters, right? So it's ready to go. So I'll be able to run this startup constructor later. Okay, so what we want to do here is it's all within this constructor called startup, right? Because there's the end of the curly brace there. So I just want to take, what are we doing? Num startups and just increment it. Done. Okay, and then so that's taking care of that. So let me just that to do says it there. Let me just run it just to make sure I don't have any errors. So I think I still have to write another method. Yep. So part 3 says write a static method. There it is, to call get num startups that returns a string containing the text. There have been blank startup pitches on Shark Tank where num startups blah blah blah. Okay, so it's all written there. So what I'm gonna do, first things first, right? Let me just make sure there's nothing else here. Oh, there's a couple things here. Okay. And in this case, I need to write a static method. So automatically I'm thinking this has to be public, right? And it has to be static. And I'm thinking, well, what's going to come next? Well, what am I returning here? Returns a string. Okay. So I'll do a string. So right now I've teed up a static method. That's a string type. And they want me to call it get num startups, right? And it's going to do curly braces now. Okay, so now I've basically made the shell of this like static method. Nothing's in it, but it's called get num startups. And then it wants me to return this quotation. So I'm just going to copy and paste it to start, right? I will change it in a minute. Okay, so obviously it can't, this is looking for whatever the num startups is, because that's a variable we just did here on line 29, right? Well, we made it earlier, but then line 29 is incrementing it. So what I need to do here is I'm going to go ahead and cut off that quotation and do a concatenation with the num startups. right? And then do another quotation there. Do that. I probably want a space after that too. Okay, let me just run it to make sure there's no errors, right? So I'm just kind of taking this one step at a time. So it ran, program completed, no errors. Wonderful. So to-do number one, as far as I know, has been done. All right, to-do number two. Now we have to go back to the other class, the tester class, and we have to instantiate those startups. So it wants me to do company name. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So let me see before I get too far ahead of myself. So it wants me to do touch up cup. Okay, so what are we doing here? So in order to instantiate several startup objects, so we're going to create objects again, and we're going to have to use the startup class, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do startup, and what's up touch up cup? So I'll call it maybe touch, right? Equals, and that's a new startup, isn't it? It's a new startup object. So this is no different than Painter when we did a long time ago. And then I needed to receive what? So in the startup constructor, I forget. What does it need? Oh, here it is, right? So there's that. I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this over because I'm really forgetting here, right? So I know, hey, what does this thing actually look like? So it's ready to receive a string name, which is touch up cup. And then let's do a comma, right? Because the next thing it wants is a description, which is paint storage cup. And the last thing it wants is got deal is true. Okay, so that's done. So now it's declared. Let's go ahead and keep going. I guess I'll just keep copy and paste this basically. I don't know why this went backwards, but startup. What's the next one? Spark. It's new startup. We're gonna call it. It's a lot here, right? Spark charge. I'm just gonna do two because I don't want to type everything out. You can do that on your own too. Car charger, and then we want it to be true. They got the deal. Sweet. Okay, so those are done, right? So we're all using the startup constructor. Now I need to actually use the get num startups. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start printing, right? Because I need to print this text that I just created up there, and it's gonna be we're gonna use the startup class, right? And then we're gonna call the method get num startups. And that should do it. So again, what are we doing here is we're using the class. So right now we have two objects. We have touch and spark. Okay. Those are all getting teed up within within the startup class when we run this guy, right? The startup constructor. Okay. And then it's going to go ahead and produce, you can see the to string, whether or not it got the deal, right? No deal. Let's see if it actually does it. So when we run it, and it just tells me there have been 2 startup pitches on Shark Tank, which is all I wanted to do, right? Let's see. Am I missing anything? I think that's it. Let me test it. All right, so everything succeeded. Just out of curiosity, let's change this guy to false just for fun. If I run it clear and run it again, it should only tell me there's 1 successful Shark Tank thing. Oh, there have been 2 startup pitches. Okay, my bad. It's just showing the number of pitches we've made. So that's that. So it's just going to count it. That's all. And that's all they wanted, right? Yeah. So I hope this helps. Let me go ahead and finish this. And then we should be good there if it loads.